Rain-wet blackberry canes with new green fruit emerging. Title, Retirement. Don Bailey, owner of Bailey Farms, Snohomish County.
My grandfather started farming here in about 1918, and then his son Cliff was the next farmer, and then my brother and I and my other brother for a while were the next generation, and now Anne and Elizabeth are the fourth generation. And we've evolved over time from being a dairy farm to now Anne has her own U-pick business, but we have a U-pick vegetable farm, and then we have a compost facility here on the farm too, where we use the compost on our fields and sell to the public. The farm, just like everyone else, has to change with the times.
Next to her father, Ann Bailey, manager of Bayland Farms, Snohomish County.
I grew up on this farm as well, and my parents started a U-pick business when I was 2 years old. So when you grow up on a farm, you're a farmer from day one, kind of, because you're following around your parents, or they pay you $5 to do a certain chore, or whatever it is. So you just grow up with it. But that being said, I don't think I necessarily wanted to be a farmer as a kid. So, I went to school and did all of that and found my way back here. And I do it because I like it.
A grassy field stretches out to hillside homes.
I see us being so close to so many people as a huge opportunity. Because people want to come to the farms. They love getting outside, and they love this farm experience where they can go dig potatoes or pick green beans or pick an apple off the tree. People will drive an hour or 2 hours to get here, and then we've got people right around us in our local community that come out. That being said, there are some challenges. Basically, from here to Seattle, there's a lot of concrete, a lot of suburbs, industrial buildings. The hillside above us is, developing itself out to the maximum. And as a result, we have runoff. So during our rainy months, there's water that piles up at the base of the hill, which is where our farm starts.
Cars whiz past a new housing development next to farmland, an old campaign sign for Cliff Bailey, GOP.
My father, Cliff Bailey, was on the Snohomish County Council and in the state Senate, and he was always a champion of farmland preservation. That's why we participated then with the Washington Farmland Trust to preserve the farm forever, basically. So in effect, what that did was we didn't have to sell the farm to somebody else or sell it for development, because we got a little nest egg to help us in retirement, and the farm could then remain in the family and remain a farm. That allows Anne and Elizabeth to rent and possibly own some of the land company in the future so they can keep farming. And then maybe, who knows, who can predict the future, but maybe the fifth generation will want to follow in their footsteps.
Rows of frilly young tomato plants in a high-tunnel greenhouse. Hillary Ayton, Associate Director, Washington Farmland Trust.
We were actually connected first with Don Bailey, who is kind of the middle generation. So Don's parents, Cliff and Rosemary, were still the owners of the farm and the farm business, Bailey Farm. Cliff and Rosemary had been retired for some time. Don and his brothers were thinking about retirement, and Don's daughter, Annie, was in particular looking to take on operation of the farm as the next generation. So kind of bringing all those pieces together, we started talking with Don as well as Cliff and Rosemary about what that succession timeline could look like, how an easement might play a role in that, what the benefit of an easement could be, and what it could look like on that property. A lot of that was thinking about how that could fit into the retirement plans of the brothers, how that might fit into their goals with retirement, their goals of transitioning the farm to Annie, how those pieces came together. We worked for about 1.5 years to secure funding for the easement. We also did an appraisal for the easement to understand how much would that easement be worth, what are those development rights worth, and how might that influence what they were able to do in their retirement planning. After we had the funding secured and we knew the value of the easement, we knew how that would work for the family, we started doing the easement drafting, making sure every generation had, their imprint on what the conservation easement said, what those terms would be, align that with our funders at the state and at the county, and then work towards bringing all those pieces together towards closing. One of the challenges that they navigated was really when you're talking about multiple generations involved and agreeing to something. We worked really hard to make sure that they had their own legal and financial advice that was really supporting them in the discussions between the generations and ensuring that they were getting something that was going to work for everybody. That was part of that family succession.
Maria Schmidlkoffer, attorney at Schwabe, Williamson & Wyatt PC, in an office overlooking downtown Salem.
People will come to me and they're not really sure how to get their farm where they want it to go. And so my job is to understand legally what are their options and then try to fit that into what their goals are and how they want to accomplish that. And so it's a very creative role in some respects because each family has different reasons for passing on the farm and how they want to pass it on. And so I help them figure out what's the best way. And then I prepare all the legal documents necessary to do that. So a lot of times I'm quarterbacking the meetings to help the family know what they want to do, and then we'll have follow-ups to decide what makes the most sense in the context of it all. Most people approach me when they're ready to have retired yesterday, and then they're saying, how can we get this done as soon as possible, or if they have an emergency. A lot of people also approach me within a year or two of when they're ready to retire or when they're ready to transfer the farm. And I can work under all of those circumstances, and I do, out of necessity. I think it's better to get it going as soon as you can. With a farm succession plan, it's very important that if you have a business, and let's say it's a limited liability company, that you have an operating agreement. A lot of times people will set up an LLC through the state and they might do it themselves and they haven't really thought through what does that agreement say, or do I even have an operating agreement? Those can really make or break a farm succession plan because operating agreements are not created equally. They are all different, and a lot of them have transfer provisions that affect how much a farm might transfer for to and who they can transfer to.
When my parents entered into the agreement for the conservation easement of the farmland, they established a land company so it would be easier for the next generation. They could lease land from the land company and have their own farming enterprise. And it's made it an easier transition from one generation to the next.
I think as they looked at retirement and how the easement funds supported retirement of the three brothers, they had to look at kind of how those funds flowed through different ownership shares. Again, that was really for their financial advisors and attorneys to ensure it was structured correctly, but we were aware of it and we tried to ensure that our process aligned with however they needed to structure their questions, answer anything related to the estate planning.
The tricky part of retirement planning is how do we make it economically viable for both the generation that wants to retire and the generation coming in. And there's a different formula for that for each family business situation. There's not a one size fits all. It really depends on the economics of how your farm's doing and how the business is doing. And so we come up with a creative solution to determine this will work for everybody. I would say the estate plan is the core thing that you start with first. And then as you develop your business and as your business grows, then you really start developing the farm succession plan with that of what this thing that I'm building, where do I want it to go and how do I want it to get there? Now, if you waited until you're in your 60s, which I think is what most of us do, then yes, a lot of times we're concurrently figuring out the estate plan and the business succession plan and how those things need to work together, and we'll do it together.
In the UPIC parking lot, large metal tubs overflow with bright red blossoms, one in a growing rain puddle.
So with the easement, what it did was it really gave the next generation of farmers an opportunity to continue farming because it made it affordable. So, if the development rights were still with the farm, there's a lot of family members, there's a lot of Baileys, and not everyone wants to be a farmer. So with the development rights, it's worth a lot. But now that those are out of the picture, there's no temptation of that. And a farmer can afford to be a farmer.
Hillary.
The easement was really an important source of revenue to help make that retirement succession possible for kind of that middle generation of brothers. I think also one of the things that was important for us to ensure we did in structuring that easement with the Baileys was make sure that we had whatever infrastructure needs the next generation, Annie, might need for operation of the farm. So for the Baileys, that meant making sure that we kept an allowance for a new residence on the property so that Annie and her family could live there as they moved into operation of the farm. So that was something really important that we navigated. I think that's kind of the important piece, is thinking about not only how that easement helps you meet those financial goals or those asset estate goals of your retirement plan, but also what does the next generation need to be successful.
Blackberries just fruiting in the rain. Pink roses and red poppies grow tall and vibrant by the barn where Dawn stands.
The Washington Farmland Trust kind of has an audit function where they'll come out and kind of walk the farm every year to make sure we're not putting in a housing development or, violating the conservation easement. So, there's a commitment to keep the farming going instead of just collecting the money and putting it in your pocket and walking away and letting the land grow up to blackberries and trees and that type of thing. The focus isn't just conservation and let it go wild. It's conservation of the farming practices itself.
So for any farmers who are potentially thinking about putting their land into a conservation easement, if you're entering into an easement, you're committing to being a farm forever. You're not looking to develop. You want to continue farming, and you want the next generation to get the opportunity if they wish to. Like the lawyer said going into it, it's a win-win because it's going to stay a farm and you're going to get some money out of it as well. So bottom line is if you want to see your farm continue farming into the future, then it's a good option.
So I think my number one piece of advice in families is a hard one. It's to communicate freely with each other and explain what you're doing and why. And it goes both ways. So it's not the necessarily old-fashioned way of the parents just talking to the kids and saying, this is what we're doing. I mean, sometimes that does happen and that's okay. But it's the kids also saying, this is what we want, because that's what we're really trying to align in a farm succession plan is what do the parents want and how do they see it happening, and are the kids in the same place where they're ready to receive it or they want to receive it. You really want to start early and then revisit it as it goes, because a 40-year-old's plan with minor children is going to be different than a 50-year-old's plan they're in the thick of, producing at that point. And then a 60-year-old's plan is when they're really starting to think, well, should I retire someday? And so those are all slightly different plans, but I think it's really important to get things going early so that you have a foundation that you can build on and refine over time. Don't be afraid to just get going with it. So even if your plan's not perfect, some kind of plan is better than no plan. You can at least get the core documents in place so that if there's an emergency, there's clearly identified people who can help. And so that's a key thing, is just to get going with it. Get over the hurdle of, I don't know where to start.
An old red Chevy flatbed truck sits permanently in the grass by tidy rows of apple trees near a big gray barn. The sky is thick with clouds. This program was created thanks to generous funding from AgWest Farm Credit, Harperton Foundation, Land Trust Alliance, and Roundhouse Foundation. Logo for Oregon Agricultural Trust.